Hello. If you've been watching my videos and following me, which if you have, I appreciate it. Thank you. You have noticed that I've started doing a series of the women of the Gospels, women whose faith outshined the faith of their male counterparts, women that more than one gospel highlighted. Now I want to conclude this series talking about four women who demonstrated tremendous courage, devotion to Jesus, love for Jesus, and faith in Jesus that outshined their male counterparts, that outshined even the future leaders of the church, the apostles. So who are these women? Well, let me introduce them to you first, and then I'll tell you a story. The first one is Mary Magdalene. So who's Mary Magdalene? Well, she was the one that Jesus drove out. Not one, but 7 demons. Yep, drove out 7 demons. She experienced deliverance. Jesus delivered her. So she was really, really messed up. And the more Jesus does for someone, generally the more thankful they are and the more grateful they are. So she was one of Jesus' disciples. And Jesus had women disciples, a lot of them. And in this era, it was actually uncommon for a rabbi to have female disciples. But Jesus didn't care about culture. He didn't let culture define him. He instead defined culture and transformed it. Another woman, Joanna. Now, who's Joanna? Joanna was also someone that Jesus healed. It doesn't say from what, but he healed her, and she became one of Jesus' disciples. Now, Joanna was actually a part of the royal court of King Herod. That means she had a lot of money. She was wealthy. She was probably a main contributor to Jesus' ministry, funding his ministry. It kind of makes sense why Jesus never asked a dime for his ministry and actually encouraged people to give to the poor and actually commanded one person to give to the poor. Another one was Mary of James. Mary of James. Not Mary of Jesus. Mary of James. Now, she really believed that Jesus was the Messiah. She really believed that Jesus was king and that Jesus would establish a kingdom. She believed this so much that she requested that her 2 sons sit at the right and the left of Jesus when he begins his kingdom. And then the other one is Salome. And not much is talked about her. So I don't know much about her. But keep these 4 women in mind. Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, Joanna, and Salome. Now I'm going to talk about the resurrection. But before I do, let me give you a background to what happened earlier, a few hours earlier. Jesus was in the upper room having his last meal with all 12 apostles or disciples. During this dinner, Jesus made several predictions. Number 1, he said, someone among you will betray me. This caused a stir with the apostles. I mean, imagine that. Jesus flat out says in a clear, distinct way, one of you will betray me. Then Jesus makes another prediction. He says, all of you will desert me. All the disciples are like, no, no, Peter. Now, what's Peter known for? Big mouth. Peter runs his mouth. Oh, no, Jesus, I will never desert you. Then he goes one step further. Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you. So he singles himself out, places himself above the other disciples. Other words saying, I am the most devoted one to you, Jesus. I will never, ever, ever desert you. Jesus then puts him in his place. He says, nope, matter of fact, you will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And you know what Peter says? No, I will never do that. Matter of fact, I will die for you. I will die for you, Jesus. That's a pretty bold claim. He made a vow. And matter of fact, all the disciples made a vow that night that they would not desert Jesus, no matter what. So then Jesus leads this group to a garden in Gethsemane. And Jesus leaves the group and he starts to pray. Then Jesus comes back. And what happens? He is met with a crowd. Him and his disciples are met with a crowd of temple guards and Roman soldiers, with Judas, one of the 12, at the center. And Judas goes up to Jesus and kisses Jesus on the cheek. Why does he do that? Because that was a signal to point out, this is the Jesus, this is the guy you want to get. And pandemonium breaks out. The soldiers and the guards start to advance. Peter draws out his sword, cuts off the high priest's servant's ear. And Jesus tells Peter, put away your sword, and heals the servant's ear. Then a Roman soldier tries to get a hold of Mark. And what does Mark do? He wiggles out of his tunic, half naked, and starts to run. And all the disciples, they scatter, they run, they flee as fast as they can. Then Jesus is led to the courthouse, to the courtyard, inside Caiaphas' court to be tried. Peter has enough boldness to tag along, and he waits outside of the court, warming his hands over the fire. But then something happens that totally catches him off guard. Some people go up to him and say, hey, I know who you are. You're one of Jesus' followers, aren't you? And what does Peter say? No, you have the wrong guy. I don't know this man. And this wasn't a one-time thing. Another person goes up to him. Hey, no, you are one of Jesus' followers. No, I'm not. And Peter starts cursing. passionately denying that he knows Jesus. Third person comes up to him. No, I know you. You are a follower of Jesus. And Peter again says, oh no, I'm not. As soon as he says that, he hears a rooster crow and immediately remembers what Jesus told him. So he leaves in defeat, in humiliation. I mean, think how humble, how humiliated he felt. Because back then, disciples don't deny they don't know the master. And disciples are willing to die for the rabbis. That's devotion. But Peter didn't have enough devotion to do that for his rabbi, for his master, for Jesus. He let fear get in the way. Fear of being caught. Then Jesus gets tried before Pontius Pilate. And Pilate's reluctant. He's like, this man's innocent. I'm not going to kill him. But then the Jewish leaders issue a threat. They said, Pilate, this man claims to be a king. And if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar's. In other words, if you let this man go, then you are siding with the king. So Pilate ordered Jesus to be crucified. Then while Jesus was being nailed to the cross, and when he was being nailed to the cross, one apostle showed up, John. One apostle showed up to see Jesus to the end. John. What is John referred as? The apostle or the disciple that Jesus loves. John showed more love for Jesus and more devotion for Jesus than any of the other apostles. But it's Peter that spoke the most. I've said this in my other video, and I'll say it again. If you want to know how much someone loves you, don't listen to the words. Watch their actions. Watch how they treat you. And in America, I think us Christians, we rely so much on our words and not enough on our action. We want to speak the truth in love, thinking that's a very loving thing to do. And it really isn't. The very loving thing to do is how you treat someone, is what you do for that person. That's loving someone. That's what the disciple John did. But guess what? The women was also at the cross too. They were there. And Mary, the mother of Jesus, was at the cross as well. So then eventually, Jesus dies. He gives up his spirit. He says it's finished and dies. And they take him from the cross. This is on a Friday before sundown. They take him down from the cross and they put him in a tomb. And not only that, but then Pontius Pilate orders that a stone be rolled by several Roman soldiers over the entrance of the tomb, blocking it. And because it was only a few hours before Sabbath, the there was no time to anoint Jesus' body, no time to do the Jewish custom of preparing a body for burial. They had to leave. They had to go home. So there they are at a house. And it wasn't just the male disciples, the apostles, the women were there too. Now, I don't want to gloss over this. I want to share some important things for us to think about and keep in mind. The women and the apostles were hiding in fear. Now, you may ask, why were they hiding in fear? What were they afraid of? Well, do you remember what I told you? Pontius Pilate had be put on top of on the cross. Oh no, but I didn't say that. He did, King of the Jews. You know what Romans do to kings? They crucify him. They don't stop there. You know what else they do? They go after the followers. And they go after the followers to crucify them too. And guess what? Women were not exempt. The Romans also crucified women. Peter probably shared with the group that people know who they are. At least they knew who he was. Some of the women in John probably were concerned because some of the Roman soldiers who were crucifying Jesus saw them. But you know what the biggest fear was? That one of their own, who was with Jesus for most of Jesus' ministry, who knew everywhere Jesus stayed and his disciples stayed, probably even knew the location of where they were staying at now, was on the side of the enemy, could easily lead the Roman soldiers to their house, to where they were at. Another thing too, they were probably experiencing profound disappointment because their master, their rabbi, was dead. The, the, the Messiah was dead, just like all the other false messiahs, just like all the other men who led groups, had followings that just died away. Probably they were thinking, this isn't how the Messiah is supposed to be. The Messiah isn't supposed to die, and that's it. The Messiah is supposed to set up a kingdom, overthrow the Romans, and set up a Jewish kingdom. But it shows they didn't know the Bibles. They didn't know the Old Testament. Because the Old Testament does say the Messiah would die. It does, in several places, matter of fact. Also says something else about the Messiah, that he will rise from the dead. And Jesus, even in the upper room, the Last Supper, told them, what? I'm going to rise in 3 days. I'm going to rise from the dead. But for some reason, they forgot that. They were disillusioned. Their movement ended. And they didn't know what to do. So they stayed in that house with doors locked, windows closed, huddling in fear until Sunday morning, until the Sabbath ended. 4 women did something, made a decision. They decided they would not let fear stop them from paying their final respects to their master. They were not going to let fear stop them from being shown the devotion one last time to Jesus. They were not going to let disillusionment. They weren't going to let hopelessness. They were not going to let depression stop them from going to Jesus one last time. A lot of times I hear men and some women describe women as being emotional. So emotional. And they think with their emotions. Even to the point that they're called, and these are actual things that men have said, gullible, stupid, naive, too emotional to even vote for the country, for the future leaders. Too emotional to be leaders of the church or leaders in anything. But men are often described as logical. They lead with their logic. Therefore, men are more qualified to be leaders in government and in church, and men are more qualified to vote because they can vote accurately. But in this case, that belief is shattered because the 4 women actually took their emotions, their real big emotions they were feeling, and suppressed them, laid them aside, and say, nope, nope, we're going to Jesus. And the men, the logical ones, who are also feeling big emotions, because men feel big emotions, guys. Men can get emotional too, okay? Saying men can't, that's a lie. Men can. They let their emotions get to them and stop them. And not only that, but not one apostle volunteered to accompany the women to Jesus' tomb. Not one of them. Not one of them said, hey, I'll come to protect you. Not one of them. They failed. So the women left on an open road where they could easily be picked up by a Roman soldier, walked to Jesus' tomb. On the way, one of them made an observation, who was also there when Jesus' body was buried in the tomb. She goes, wait a minute, we have a problem. There's a big, heavy stone at the entrance of the tomb. How are we going to roll it away? Now, let me ask you, do you think the women just stopped and said, dang it, let's go back? No. Nope. They kept going. They kept going. So they didn't even worry about physical obstacles preventing them from going to Jesus to pay their last respects, to anoint his body, to honor him. They kept going. And when they approached the tomb, when they came to the tomb, there's different accounts that I'm going to go into. But basically, the stone is rolled away. They see an angel. They go in the tomb. Jesus isn't there. Or maybe they don't go in the tomb. Yeah, I don't think they even go in the tomb. But they see an angel. And that's it. But they stay. And guess what happens next? Jesus shows up. Jesus appears before them in bodily form with the scars in his hands and in his feet. Throughout the Gospels, you'll see that Jesus rewards faith, that Jesus rewards obedience. That when we are faithful to Jesus, when we are obedient to Jesus, he always shows up. He always reveals himself. He always speaks a word if we're listening. Jesus rewarded these four women's faith and devotion and courage and love in the most spectacular, special way he could by personally showing up, saying, hey, I'm here. I haven't left you. Then Jesus tells the women, go and tell the men, give them a message. So Jesus gives these women a message. A lot of times he'll do that. He'll give you a message. So he gave them a message to tell the men, to tell the future leaders of the church, to tell them this, go to Galilee and wait, for I will be there. So they do. Peter, well, all the disciples think the women have lost their minds and that they're speaking nonsense. And back then, women were looked down upon as silly, as again, emotional, not logical. So Peter goes to the tomb, not because he has faith in Jesus, because he wanted to prove the women wrong. And guess what happens when Peter goes to the tomb? Guess what happens? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Jesus doesn't appear to him. Nothing. The reason why I did this series, and the reason why the resurrection, what these four women did, is so impactful to me, is because I really wanted to show how Jesus elevated women, how Jesus viewed women. And not just Jesus, but the gospel writers. There are a lot of times people say, well, the Bible is written by men. The Bible is written by men. Like that discounts it. And it actually doesn't. Because the four gospel writers did something a lot of men would not do. They highlighted women's faith. Not only that, but they even wrote about how women's faith outshined their own and put them to shame. So husbands, for you that have Christian wives, I want you to do me a big favor tonight or tomorrow, wherever you see this video, to thank your wife, to thank her for her faith, her strong faith. To thank her for her courage. To thank her for her devotion to Jesus. And I want you to do something else too. Listen to her. Yeah. I know in Ephesians 5, it says women are submit to their husbands. But the word submit doesn't mean to be quiet. No. Doesn't mean to be quiet. Doesn't mean to be silent. Doesn't mean that husbands should dismiss their wives. No. And their wife being the husband's helpmate doesn't mean the wife is below the husband. No. And a helpmate doesn't keep silent. No. Nope. They don't. Not a true helpmate. So listen to your wives more. And when you have Bible studies with them, listen to what they get out of Scripture. Because a lot of times, when Jesus wants to talk to you, he's going to give the message to your wife. Just like Jesus gave the message to the 4 women at the resurrection. Pastors, I'm going to say something really controversial. Let women give their testimonies. Let women give their testimonies, how they came to Jesus and why they still believe in him and have faith in him. Open up the pulpit for women to teach everyone. Because here's the thing. A lot of times, Jesus wants to speak to your congregation, to the men and women of your congregation. And he wants to do it through women. Just like he did it through the 4 women who saw Jesus rise from the dead. That Jesus gave the message for the men to the women to tell the men, go to Galilee and wait for me. And we need to honor women. We need to honor women instead of put them down. We need to honor them. We need to do what Jesus did and the gospel writers did and elevate them. And I'm not saying above men, but equal to men. We need to stop dismissing women. We need to stop thinking women is less than. We need to stop not listening to them. And we need to pay attention to people's actions more than their words. I love you guys. More importantly, Jesus loves you more.